We're beginning chapter 24 of The Ultimate Evil by Maury. Murder reigned in Southern California. By 1985, David Berkowitz's credibility and that of the prison informants was in good standing, and Manson too, as the Arliss Perry inquiry demonstrated, didn't lie to the New York cult when recounting that horrid tale. The Christine Freud setting was also bolstered solidly and joined the innumerable other facts uncovered about the various cases since I began the torturous journey in August 1977. With that background and what we'd learned about Phil Benson, it would have been foolish to dismiss the claim about a real motive in the Tate murders. Many years had crawled by since those killings occurred, which made any investigation a difficult proposition. But the effort was important to the Son of Sam case and others we'd probed. All were said to be linked, and the discovery of a motive in the Tate murders would further cement the existence of the Satanic network that operated between New York, Texas, California, and the Dakotas. The evidence would reveal that the Manson case went far deeper than originally believed. There were two elements to work with. Was the allegation of a hit credible? And if so, what was the motive and for whom did Manson volunteer to commit these crimes? In this context, the why of the killings also included Manson's own motivation. What did he stand to gain from his alleged voluntary enlistment? The helter-skelter motive presented in court was based on Manson's theology, heavily inspired by process teachings, that a wave of violence should sweep across the world to bring on the end. In Manson's mind, helter-skelter, the name came from a Beatles song Manson twisted, would ignite a black-white race war by leaving suggestive clues at slaughter scenes. His disciples would deceive the establishment into blaming a radical group such as the Black Panthers for the crimes. The blacks would taste victory in the resulting war, but would founder trying to govern the new order. Then Charlie and the family would emerge from hiding in the desert and assume command. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi built an admirable case on that premise, and it is one I don't dispute completely. The prison informants amplified on helter-skelter, contending that there were at least two motives for the killings. Put another way, Manson was said to be a ticking bomb, and somebody knew it. That somebody then tossed the bomb right into the house. 10050 Celio Drive in Benedict Canyon, northwest of downtown Los Angeles. The Tate LaBianca murders occurred on consecutive weekend nights. August 9th and 10th, 1969 were the 7 victims. Actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, Roman Polanski's friend, Wojtek Frykowski, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, prominent hairdresser Jay Sebring, and Stephen Parent were slain shortly after midnight on Celio Drive. Parent, 18, had been visiting young caretaker William Garrettson, who occupied the guest cottage on the rented Polanski property. He was shot dead by Charlie Tex Watson, 22, and his Rambler neared the exit gate. Inside the house, the others were shot, stabbed, and beaten. Frykowski and Folger, his girlfriend, were chased from the home and died on the lawn. Sebring and Tate were killed in the living room. A length of rope around their necks bound them together. There is evidence that after the killers left, someone, Manson, and a companion arrived at the house and tried to hang Sharon Tate and Sebring from the front porch, but were unsuccessful and dragged them back to the living room. Mastermind Manson, while not a participant, was convicted, as were the actual killers, Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Susan Atkins, who admitted tasting Tate's blood. The next night, in LA's Los Feliz section, wealthy supermarket president Lino LaBianca, 44, and his wife Rosemary, 38, were stabbed to death inside their home at 3301 Waverly Drive. Manson, who initially tied up the couple, was convicted here as well, along with actual killers Watson Krenwinkel and Leslie Van Houten. After several months of investigation, the cases, which the Tate detectives didn't link, broke when Atkins, in jail on another charge, talked to her cellmates in a manner similar to Berkowitz's conversations with Vinny and Danny. To build the case against the others, the LA prosecution eventually granted immunity to Linda Kasabian, who was at both scenes but was not the killer. The police investigation of the murders, especially the Tate killings, left much to be desired. As Bugliosi pointed out in his book Helter Skelter, and it is the Tate murders to which the New York informants directed their comments, but there were a number of intriguing facts surrounding the LaBianca's slaying too. I need some water. At the time of his death, Lino LaBianca, president of the Gateway Market Chains, was about $233,000 in debt, apparently a result of his addiction to horses. That is a motive for murder. LaBianca not only bet on the ponies, he owned 9 thoroughbreds. He had also served on the board of directors of a Hollywood bank police believed was mafia connected. Several of the bank's board members were convicted of fraudulent financial dealings. LaBianca, however, had no criminal record. Somewhere in that maze, another motive may have lurked. His wife, Rosemary, had herself accumulated a considerable fortune by the time she died. Divorced and the mother of 2 young children, she had worked as a car hop and cocktail waitress to support herself at the time of her 1959 marriage to Leno. She was a waitress at the Los Felines Inn. However, she subsequently became a partner in a dress shop boutique carriage and put some cash into the stock market. A waitress in 1959, Rosemary LaBianca herself left an estate 10 years later, valued at $2,600,000, more than $5 million in 1986 dollars. It was, to put it mildly, a remarkable success story. In the weeks before the murder, there were problems in the LaBianca home. Rosemary told a neighbor the house was entered more than once while she and Leno were away on weekends. Their telephone was also bugged. Ed Sanders reported that a rare coin collection possibly taken from the home was later discovered at another house on Waverly, one said to be owned by a bookmaker who abandoned the residence about a week after the murders. There was a concurrent story which held that one of the Manson's top lieutenants, Bruce Davis, took a valuable collection of silver dollars to England about 9 months before the killings. Davis did make the trip, that spent time with the process in London, according to LA homicide sources. Whether or not he actually had the silver dollars is unknown. But Leno LaBianca was indeed an avid coin collector. Nonetheless, it was determined that the LaBiancas were randomly slain by Manson's children. But could the LaBiancas have been under someone's scrutiny? Yes, they were. And it also remains possible that a connection to Manson lay somewhere in the abyss. For Manson was a career criminal and con man with a multitude of contacts on both sides of Los Angeles tracks. Linda Kasabian testified that Manson had her drive indiscriminately around LA before specifically directing her to the LaBianca home on the night of the killings. LaBianca, who purchased 3301 Waverly Drive from Leno's mother in 1968, lived next door to a home formerly occupied by friends of Manson. So Manson knew the layout of that house, 3267 Waverly, yet he instead chose to enter the La Bianca home at 2 a.m. with the lights on and the couple still up. And he and Tex Watson did so without leaving any signs of a break-in. And then, without any indication of struggle, they tied up the couple. Manson then left and instructed the others, who were waiting outside, to join Watson and kill them. Curiously, Leno LaBianca's boat, which was hitched to his car, was found on the street outside the house, not in the long private driveway. A coin collection was in the car's trunk, and Leno's wallet was in the glove compartment. On the street, the boat and car were almost inviting theft. It's not that Leno was careless, he was concerned about the boat and stored it in a garage of his mother's home, so its presence on the street at a point beyond his driveway was unusual. Also, water skis were removed from the boat that night. They were found behind the house, leaning on the fender of Rosemary's own car. It is reasonable to have been worried enough about the water skis to lug them at least 40 yards up the driveway to the house while leaving behind in plain view a boat hitched to a year-old Thunderbird. Then, too, Leno was slain in his pajamas, while Rosemary was found wearing one of her favorite expensive dresses over a pair of shorty pajamas. She hadn't worn it earlier in the evening. The couple had just returned from a casual day at Lake Isabella. Manson had said he told her to put the dress on, but the combination of Rosemary's attire and the boat and car in the street may signify that Rosemary went out alone shortly before the murders and didn't want to pull the rig into the long driveway, which was Leno's task. When she returned, the wallet and coins might have been left in the car because the auto and boat were parked in the driveway when the couple arrived home at about an hour before the killings. If Rosemary went out, she may have used the T-Bird or backed that car and the boat from the driveway and used her own vehicle, which was now parked behind the house. Her keys and house keys were reportedly found in the ignition of her locked car. Another enigma. Rosemary had been concerned about the house being entered. She would have gone to Lake Isabella leaving her house keys and car keys in plain view. In an unlocked vehicle? Or she had actually just driven the car right before the murders and upon her return left them behind for some reason? Combined with the absence of signs of a break-in or struggle inside the house, it is conceivable that such events occurred. If so, and combined with the other puzzling factors, they would indicate a possible connection between Manson and La Bianca. If one existed, it probably was in the narcotics area, but police reportedly found no such activity on the part of either victim. However, a Los Angeles source told me in early 1987 that Rosemary LaBianca was indeed involved in LSD dealing. The statement has not yet been corroborated. Putting aside a potential link to Manson, the LaBiancas may have been killed in a cover crime. To use Vinny's term about cult MO in New York, intended to divert police attention from real motives the night before on Celio Drive. At both residences and at the home of musician Gary Hidman, a Manson acquaintance slain July 27th over what Manson later admitted was a botched dope deal. Common elements appeared among them. Variations of the word pig written in blood. There was no attempt by the killers to disassociate the crimes. Does the fact tend to bolster the helter-skelter motive and discount the charge of real motive on Celio Drive? No, it doesn't. Because if helter-skelter was the only reason for Tate LaBianca, why did the notorious public murders stop after the LaBianca slayings? 2 consecutive nights, and Manson's master plan was terminated. Tex Watson split for Texas. Patricia Krenwinkel for Alabama, and Kasabian for New Hampshire. Why didn't they do it again and again in such a vicious publicly, or why didn't they do it again and again in such a vicious publicity garnering manner? They didn't. Manson moved his minions deep into the desert. Manson, Vinny wrote from Dannemora, was a puppet. The questions about the short-lived helter-skelter are significant, and so is the fact that Manson crimes in the summer of '69 were not motiveless. Hinman killed over dope. Bernard Crow, a black dope dealer, wounded by Manson over a drug burn. Donald Shorty Shea, a hand at the Svan movie ranch, where the clan lived, slain because he had knowledge of Tate LaBianca and the Tate slayings themselves, for which we'd soon discover a motive. In that context, it would appear that there may also have been real motive for the LaBianca murders as well, but if not, it is almost certain that they were killed to confuse the issue of legitimate motive on Celio Drive. It should be remembered that Manson did believe in Helter Skelter, so he had his own reasons for directing the butchery, even if his marching orders were issued elsewhere. Manson prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi, hampered by ineffective detective work on the Tate killings, particularly acknowledged that he only went with the helter-skelter motive in court because the police investigation failed to unearth another. Maybe they didn't look hard enough. To find another reason for the Celio Drive slayings, one has to search through the original police investigation and the extended social and narcotic circles populated by both Manson and the residents of the Tate house. At the beginning, Los Angeles authorities focused on drugs as the impetus for the killings, and 4 of LAPD's top suspects were none other than people tied closely to Mama Cass Elliott and her crowd. To the best of our knowledge, Roy Radin and Manson 2 suspect Phil Benson wasn't among them, but the fact is that these 4 men were prime targets during the investigation's first month. All were clear of direct complicity when they provided alibis and passed polygraph tests. One, however, was tested twice. The 4 who were known to police as The 4 who were known to police and others as reputed drug dealers were frequent guests at Celio Drive while Frykowski and Folger's house sat for the Polanskis from April 1st, 1969 until the night of the murders, and even after Sharon Tate returned from abroad in mid-July. The visits continued. One of the men acknowledged being in the house twice during the week of the murders, including the day before they occurred. One of Cass's entourage picked Dawson, the jet-setting son of a State Department official, actually lived in Frykowski's home when he and Abigail relocated to Celio Drive. As friends of Frykowski, Dawson, Ben Caruthers, Tom Harrigan, and Billy Doyle crashed Roman Polanski's housewarming party at 10050 Celio Drive in mid-March 1969 and were ejected after a scuffle. They weren't happy about that, but after the Polanskis left for Europe, their visits resumed at Frykowski's invitation. Billy Doyle, who was close to Mama Cass, also knew Roy Radin. Suspect Phil Benson, said a Los Angeles source who was acquainted with both men. I was in the same room with them. They were part of the same scene. They know each other, the information reported. So Benson not only knew of the Tate victims, Folger, he also knew Billy Doyle. We were getting even closer to Manson 2 and the hidden secrets of the Celio Drive nightmare. According to police reports, friends of Frykowski and our own sources, Frykowski became involved in LSD dealing and also was offered a wholesale distributorship of the amphetamine MDA, which was found in both his and Folger's systems the night they died. Frykowski, a recent immigrant to the United States, didn't have the money to make wholesale drug purchases. He was unemployed. This was a subtlety the police apparently missed, but his girlfriend had the funds. Coffee heiress Abigail Folger had the cash to support Frykowski's endeavor, and our sources say that she did just that. Folger was backing Frykowski in the drug business, said the former FBI operative who knew Folger personally, and your guy Benson got around in that scene all the time. It was what they were all into. As so often happens in narcotics merchandising, friction sparked a feud between Frykowski and the suppliers, and a member of Cass's crowd pulled a gun and threatened Frykowski's life, not knowing before the murders. Additionally, one individual from the same group became incensed when, also shortly before the killings, Frykowski threw him out of his Woodstock Road address. The eviction occurred because this friend of Cass's allegedly choked Wojtek's friend, artist Witold Kazanowski Witotke, who was temporarily living in a house while Wojtek and Folger were residing at Celio Drive. Frykowski, some said, got in way over his head without even recognizing that he was careening toward Whitewater. 4 from the Cass group were later turned in as suspects in the Tate murders by association of both Frykowski and Mama Cass, including John Phillips, Witold K., and gossip columnist Stephen Brandt. But it would be misleading to limit these men to Mama Cass. They were known to others in the social network too, and there is no telling exactly how far and in what direction the pipeline extended. And now, in the weeks of the murders, as stated, one of Cass's friends visited the Celio Drive house twice and was introduced there to Sharon Tate the day before the killings. Frykowski also received the new MDA shipment that week and was concurrently said to be in the midst of a 10-day mescaline experiment. John Phillips said in 1986 that Frykowski showed up at his Bel Air Drive home during those final days and demanded to be let in. Phillips said that he turned Wojtek away because he seemed incoherent, so the purpose of the unexpected visit remains unexplained. Also that week, Ed Sanders reported a large party was held on Celio Drive, at which Bill Doyle's acquaintance of Phil Benson was allegedly whipped as the result of a dope burn involving about $2,000 worth of cocaine, which was perpetrated on Jay Sebring, who was present at the affair. Investigating, Sanders heard only silence from those said to have had... Oh my goodness, I'm just adding words, aren't I? Investigating, Sanders heard only silence from those said to have had... I did it again. My God. Investigating, Sanders heard only silence from those said to have attended the party, whose roster apparently included John Phillips, but actor Dennis Hopper, quoted by an LA newspaper, did comment publicly on the matter. They had fallen into sadism and masochism and bestiality, and they recorded it all on videotapes too. The LA police told me this. I know that 3 days before they were killed, 25 people were invited to that house for a mass whipping of a dealer from Sunset Strip who'd given them bad dope. The party was held to honor French film director Roger Vadim, who was then married to actress and anti-war activist Jane Fonda. But at what point in the proceedings the alleged whipping taping occurred is unknown. However, Sanders reported that Sebring did bring undeveloped film to a photo lab on Wednesday, August 6th, and Polanski made off the night before. The party then apparently occurred on Tuesday night, the 5th. On the night of the killings, as noted previously, a man named Joel Rostow, the boyfriend of an employee of Sebring's, delivered some drugs to 10050 Celio Drive. Rostow would be murdered in New York about 15 months later, and another of Sebring's associates would be slain in Florida about a month before that. The name of the game was narcotics, not helter-skelter. And then there were the subjects of witchcraft, black hoods and leather aprons. While it should be recalled that Frykowski and Folger were in temporary residence at Celio Drive, it is known that British warlock Alex Saunders, who participated in a film Sharon Tate shot in England before her marriage, said she initiated Sharon into witchcraft. Saunders, who said he studied under Master Black Magician Aleister Crowley himself, was connected to OTO and other cult activity in Britain. It is not known if he was involved with the process there. But Alex Saunders said he possessed photos of Sharon standing inside a ritual magic circle. Police denied that black hoods and leather aprons were found in the loft above the living room at 10050 Celio Drive. However, Ed Sanders told me in July 1985 that FBI sources informed him those items were indeed there, along with an inverted ace of spades, and said to be a form of cultic life sign. Doris Tate, Sharon's mother, also said that a white cape was found in the house. Thus, there appears to have been no lack of real motives to supplement helter-skelter, ranging from dope to revenge to occult-related matters. There was no evidence to demonstrate the New York prison informants were wrong, and I don't think they were. Manson himself has alleged that the true motive remains secret, that a major scandal would erupt if it was revealed. Various members of his family have echoed those sentiments. Among them are Venice, California biker Danny DiCarlo, whom Sanders said police linked to a process offshoot in Santa Barbara, convicted Gary Hinman killer Bobby Bosololi, who had been affiliated with a San Francisco Satan cult, Catherine Gypsy Cher, Vern Plumley, and others. Most have ascribed the motive to a dope burn. In 1987 interview with an associate of mine, Manson added a twist to the narcotics motive. Don't you think those people deserve to die? They were involved in kiddie porn, he alleged, but didn't say just who in the Tate LaBianca cases he was referring to. Another source close to Manson told Sanders that a real millionaire friend of Manson's, whose large black car Manson wrecked around the time of the murders, was involved. This source added that an $11,000 LSD burn was in the picture. The millionaire's name wasn't revealed to Sanders, but the information narrowed the field, and there are several reasons to believe the statement had a basis in fact. One of those is an incident which occurred just 2 nights after the LaBianca slayings. Approximately 1 a.m. on August 12th, Manson arrived at the home of a friend, Melba Cronkite, who lived in the Malibu area. Manson asked Cronkite for $825 to bail out follower Mary Bruner, who'd been jailed several days before a stolen credit card charge. Melba couldn't provide the cash and watched as an angry Manson drove off behind the wheel of a large black car, apparently the same one referred to by Sanders' source. The millionaire allegation also blended with Manson's reference to a major scandal, as does a mysterious trip he made, which will be discussed shortly. Vern Plumley told a reporter that the killers went to Celio Drive to get dope purveyor Frykowski and anyone else present. This comment is both logical and supportable. It may also mesh with the millionaire LSD burn information because Frykowski, as Roman Polanski's friend, was traveling in some select circles. Beyond that, Frykowski emerges as a likely target by process of elimination. The pregnant Sharon Tate, who was overseas during 4 of the 5 previous months, would be an unlikely candidate. Abigail Folger, likewise, to an extent. She was a shadow of the controlling Frykowski who primed her narcotics usage, and the sources say she was also financing his dope distribution enterprise. On the surface, Jay Sebring may have appeared to be a plausible intended target. His cocaine habit was known to friends, and police learned of it soon after his death. But Sebring was a client rather than a dealer, and he didn't live at Celio Drive. While a frequent visitor, he usually slept at home, where he was into a mild bondage scene with willing female partners whom he'd tied up and photographed before culminating the sex act. Moreover, although Sebring intended to visit the Tate house, that final night was known by some in the crowd, there wouldn't appear to have been any guidance that he'd still be there at about 12:20 a.m. when the killers arrived, since he was scheduled to fly by San Francisco the next day and may well have intended to go home earlier. A Los Angeles source who was knowledgeable about Manson's set in 1969 said, Frykowski was the motive. He had stung his own supplier for a fair amount of money that didn't go down well at all with the people at the top of the drug scene here. And to make it worse, he was upsetting the structure of the LSD marketplace by dealing independently outside the established chain of supply. He was a renegade. The source knew Abigail Folger and others in the circle. The fair amount of money the source described may have been the $11,000 Sanders reported, but my informant said the total sum was probably a lot higher. However, the source confirmed the relevance of the black car Manson was seen driving 2 days after the murder. According to information we uncovered, the black car apparently was a Mercedes-Benz that was owned by a wealthy individual who lived part-time in Berkeley, California during the Manson era. Sources say the car owner, whom I will call Chris Jetz, was a narcotics middleman who distributed hallucinogenic drugs from secret LSD and MDA laboratories to drop-off points for pickup by elements of the Hells Angels biker gang, who controlled most of the street-level distribution of chemical narcotics in the LA area at the time. The source's name and Jetz's real name have been turned over to authorities, and the biker connection from the process and Manson to the New York prison statements had now appeared several times during the overall investigation. Sources said that Jetz had ties in the form of funding to the upscale self-awareness Elazian Institute in Big Sur, California. The Los Angeles drug scene in 1969 could be likened to a field of pyramids, which roughly divided the marketplace into various specialized segments. Near the top of one pyramid, the chemical dope edifice, was a man connected to Jetz, a superior, so to speak. This man was said to have been a former Israeli who had strong links to international intelligence community. He wasn't employed by U.S. or Israeli intelligence, at least not at the time of the murders. Rather, he was regarded as a rogue who, in addition to his elevated narcotics ranking, was suspected by some of being an operative for the Soviet Union, perhaps freelance. This information, which I unearthed in 1986, apparently explains something Ed Sanders earlier told me. There were so many investigations going on out there after the murders that I began to wonder if the process was a front for some intelligence operation. CIA. Sanders said that the FBI, Israeli intelligence, the California Beverage Control Board, the Los Angeles DA's office, as well as the LAPD and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department all mounted probes of the Tate murders, with the Treasury Department involved peripherally, and those were the ones he knew about. Whatever clandestine bonds may have existed on the top of Dope Mountain, the inquiry we conducted resulted in the determination that Frykowski was the primary target, with Folger secondary, and the LSD dealing and market control was the principal motive. Mansonite Vern Plumley added an intriguing gem to his own Frykowski comment. He said the killers had received information that Sharon Tate wasn't supposed to be home that night. Interestingly, it appears that Sharon didn't plan to spend the evening at home. Interestingly, it appears that Sharon did plan to spend the evening at the home of a girlfriend, Sheila Willis, but then changed her mind. But if Manson in fact received that tip, it could only have emanated from a handful of people, those who directly or indirectly were in contact with Sharon J. Sebring, Folger, or Frykowski within 48 hours of the murders, and one of them would have wanted people dead on Celio Drive. Could Manson himself have known any of Mama Cass's crowd, others in the extended group, or even one of the victims? The prosecution and police didn't pursue this angle successfully, but the answer is decidedly yes. Manson family associate Charles Melton said, "I've heard that Charlie used to go down to Mama Cass's place, and they were all sitting around and she'd bring out the food. Squeaky Frome, who later tried to shoot President Gerald Ford, and Gypsy Catherine Scher, were down there. Everyone would jam and have fun and eat." Manson also was closely linked to record and TV producer Terry Mulcher, his young assistant Greg Jacobson, and Beach Boys drummer Dennis Wilson. Wilson and Melcher were good friends of John Phillips, and Cass was associated with Phil Benson, among others. Phillips said that Melcher and Wilson frequently tried to interest him in Manson's music and philosophy. Talent manager Rudy Altobelli, the actual owner of 10050 Celio Drive, testified at Manson's trial that Melcher and Jacobson often praised Manson to him. But whereas Altobelli and Phillips said they declined these suggestions, Sanders reported that Manson's bus was observed parked at Phillips' Bel Air home in the autumn of 1968, and that Manson apparently also attended a 1968 New Year's Eve party there. Whether or not this was so, the links between Manson, Wilson, Cass, Phillips, Melcher, and Jacobson are evident. The Manson-Melcher relationship was instigated by Dennis Wilson in the summer of 1968. He introduced Manson to Melcher and Jacobson while Charlie and some followers were in residence at Wilson's Sunset Boulevard estate. Wilson paid dearly for his hospital attitude. The family scrounged him out of considerable money and wrecked one of his cars. One of the Beach Boys' gold records ended up in the Spahan movie ranch. But Wilson, Jacobson, and Melcher were in tune with Charlie Manson, and a Manson song rewritten by the Beach Boys was released as a Beach Boys flip side in December 1968. The A-side was a remake of Ursel Hickey's Bluebirds Over the Mountain, and Manson's backing tune was originally titled Honesty, Cease to Exist, but the group changed those words to Cease to Resist and added a new title, Never Learn Not to Love, which wasn't quite what Manson had in mind. In the spring of 1969, Wilson told a British rock magazine that the Beach Boys might release a Manson album. He called Manson the Wizard. During 1968 cease to exist period, Terry Melcher was living with actress Candice Bergen in the future death house of 1005 Celio Drive, and Tex Watson and Manson follower Dean Morehouse were said to have passed a lot of hours at that residence during the summer of '68. In fact, Morehouse actually lived in the house with Melcher's concurrence after Melcher moved to Malibu before his subtenants, the Polanskis, occupied the premises on February 15, 1969. Morehouse provides a curious twist to this story. The middle-aged former minister moved to California in 1965 from North Dakota. He was a native of Minot, of all places, went to college there and worked several jobs in the city before finding God. Then he then headed congregations in 2 North Dakota towns, one of which was near both Bismarck and Minot. In light of the Arliss Perry scenario in Bismarck and other doings in Minot, these links are provocative. Though he was gone from North Dakota by the 70s, it is certain native son Dean Morehouse had contacts there. Dean's daughter, Ruth Ann Auschie, was herself a hardcore Manson follower to the end. Though barely 17, Ruth Ann was no shrinking violet. She was implicated in the attempted murder of defector Barbara Hoyt. Auschich. O-U-I-S-C-H. How you say that, I don't know. I'm going to say Auschie. Fed her an LSD-laced hamburger in Honolulu, where Hoyt had gone to hide during the Manson trial. After Manson's arrest, a number of his society contacts, not surprisingly, tried to downplay their interaction with him. Among them was Terry Melcher, who had a show business image to consider. But Sanders reported Melcher's relationship with Manson was more extensive than generally believed. For instance, Sanders wrote that Manson and others in the family occasionally borrowed Melcher's car and were given permission to use his credit card while on the road. It was love and flowers in those early days. In addition, Manson became quite friendly with a young divorcee, Charlene Kaffritz, who was a close friend of Melcher confidant Alan Warnick. Like Melcher, Kaffritz was a person with considerable wealth. She also was a friend of Sharon Tate and attended her funeral. Manson met Kaffritz at Dennis Wilson's beach house in 1968. Later, Charlie and 3 of his female followers visited at Kaffritz's expense a luxury resort in Reno, Nevada, where she was staying. While in Reno, in December 1968, Kaffritz, who was awaiting a divorce settlement there, which would net her about $2 million, tried to buy Manson a Cadillac. Sanders reported, interestingly, she was also said to have purchased a number of thoroughbred horses, which were then resold or given away. In Reno, Charlene Kaffritz took a series of private films of Manson and the girls. The whereabouts of these perhaps sensual epics is unknown, but in the Kaffritz connection, which some close to the Manson case consider a good lead for anyone interested in following through on the investigation, is now minus Charlie herself. She died about 2 years later of an overdose. Moving forward to the summer of slaughter, Terry Melcher and Greg Jacobson visited Manson at the Spahan Ranch on June 3rd. Earlier, Jacobson and Dennis Wilson recorded Manson for an album audition, but Melcher, who sat in on the session, wasn't too impressed. The music business was career goal number 1 for Manson, who wasn't thrilled that Melcher was lagging on the deal. A certain animosity was brewing. but now the talk was of a documentary film which would depict the daily life of the family. Stills and tapes for a presentation were already shot. Manson, however, wanted machetes and gore, whereas the others sought to portray the soft side of communal living, then in vogue in America. Melcher had previously come to the ranch on May 18th when he listened to Charlie and the girls sing. He'd heard better, but he returned on June 3rd with Jacobson and sound engineer Mike Deasy, who had a rolling recording studio in his van. Melcher was also accompanied by a young starlet named either Shara or Sharon, who apparently been to Spahan before, wearing wigs to disguise her identity. While at the ranch, Manson and Melcher got into a heated argument at Jacobson, and the starlet stood by. Its origin was unknown, but it apparently concerned the focus of the film. Mansonite Edward Sunshine Pierce saw them arguing but was unable to overhear any particulars. However, about 30 minutes later, he knew something was up. Manson walked over to Pierce, pledged him to secrecy, and asked if he'd help murder somebody. He said he had one person in particular he wanted me to help him kill, and said there might have to be some other people killed, Pierce said later. He said he could probably round up maybe $5,000 or more and give it to me if I helped him pull this job. Manson didn't name anybody, but Pierce had some clouded insight into why Charlie wanted to accomplish the crimes. Paraphrasing Manson, Pierce said, "If you ever want to get anything and you want it bad enough, you can't let anybody come between you when you are going to do something." Pierce believed Manson was serious, so he called his family in Texas and they wired money to him. Sunshine Pierce flew home the next day. Both Jacobson and Melcher were familiar with Manson's philosophies. Jacobson, for instance, told prosecutor Bugliosi that over the course of a year preceding the murders, he had 100 hours of in-depth conversations with Manson. It is somewhat perplexing that neither Wilson, Jacobson, nor Melcher thought of Manson immediately after the carnage at Melcher's former residence. In any event, they didn't call the police, but perhaps they were frightened or simply didn't make the connection. Melcher, for example, professed great fear of Manson during the trial, asking if he could testify through a loudspeaker in a side room rather than face Charlie head on. The request was denied, but as it turned out, he needn't have worried. Manson's defense attorney didn't cross-examine Melcher. Prosecutor Bugliosi said that this strategy was probably at Manson's request. Also, Paul Fitzgerald, first Manson's attorney and later the representative of Patricia Krenwinkel, announced to the press that John Phillips and Mama Cass would be called as defense witnesses, but for some reason plans were changed, and the two former members of the Mamas and the Papas never took the stand. As noted, various motives for the killings were evident both on and beneath the surface. Pertinent activities at Celio Drive immediately prior to the murders have also been discussed, but Manson's own actions just before and after the slayings may provide an important piece to the puzzle. After having been around LA all summer, Manson left town early on Sunday morning, August 3rd, just days before the murder. After purchasing gas at a station in nearby Canoga Park, he made a beeline for the coast and Highway 1. Up the coastline he drove, heading for Big Sur, about 300 miles away. The following morning at about 4 o'clock, he picked up Stephanie Schramm, a 17-year-old hitchhiker, at a gas station somewhat south of Big Sur, apparently in Gorda, where Manson was earlier in the day. Isn't known for certain, but he may have been at the Elysian Institute in Big Sur, a well-known sensitivity center whose seminars attracted affluent knowledge seekers of the day. Its sessions were hosted by philosophers, psychiatrists, meditation proponents, and even prominent Satanists. Robert de Grimston, head of the process, reportedly lectured there. But if Manson wasn't positively placed at Elysian, Esalen, Esalen, Esalen on August 3rd, he indeed was 2 nights later. Schramm, who stayed with Manson and was initiated to LSD by him, told prosecutors that Manson left her outside Esalen in his truck, took his guitar, and went inside. When she awoke in the morning, he was back, and she said his mood wasn't good. It was August 6th, about 66 hours from the murder. Why was Manson at Esalen? There is no clear answer, he told some followers at the Spahan Ranch, that he was heading north to look for new recruits. He later told another associate, Paul Watkins, that he played his guitar for top people at Esalen who rejected his music. It is also quite possible that he was there for a reason which involved chemical narcotics dealer Chris Jetts, whose sources say provided a degree of financial backing for Esalen. However, Esalen officials refused to acknowledge Manson's presence there. Big Sur isn't far from Santa Cruz, home of Chingon cult activity, and when Manson picked up Stephanie south of Big Sur at 4 a.m. on August 4th, he had 2 male companions with him. Stephanie testified that unidentified men were hitchhikers who soon left the truck. At least that's what she thought they were. Regardless, Manson and Stephanie drove south from Big Sur on August 6th, stopped overnight at the Spahan Ranch outside LA, and then drove to the home of Stephanie's married sister in San Diego on the 17th. That night, Manson frightened the sister by predicting, "People are going to be slaughtered. They'll be lying on their lawns dead." And within 30 hours, they indeed would be. Was Manson's alleged rejection at Esalen the final straw, compounded by his learning on August 8th that Bobby Beausoleil, Beausoleil, no idea, I'm going to call it Beausoleil, had been bagged for the Hitman murder? It was impossible to say with certainty. Manson was the only source for what happened at the Institute. If he'd been there for another reason, he wasn't likely to inform stranger Stephanie or Paul Watkins, who was not considered part of the insider murder machine. But the New York informants hadn't said Manson lacked his own reasons for committing the crimes. The point was made that someone took advantage of Manson's madness and guided him to Celio Drive. In that sense, whether Manson was spurned at Esalen is irrelevant. It's only if he wasn't that matters. After the killings, Manson's actions indicate that if he was under orders on the murders, it wasn't in exchange for money. He first showed up at Dennis Wilson's house with Stephanie. Wilson later said Manson wanted $1,500 so he could get out to the desert. So much for Helter Skelter. It was at this time, Stephanie testified, that Wilson told Manson the police had questioned him about someone who'd been shot in the stomach. This was Bernard Lotzapapa Crow, a black dope dealer who lived near Mama Cass. Manson, who wounded him July 1st over a marijuana burn, and one of Wilson's friends were damn. Okay, where are we? Manson would have Manson had wounded him July 1st over a marijuana burn, and one of Wilson's friends was there at the time. Wilson turned down Manson's request for money, and Charlie then issued a veiled threat against Wilson's son. Charlie also sought out Greg Jacobson and was again unsuccessful in his quest for cash. He handed Jacobson, of all things, a .44 bullet and advised him to tell Wilson there were more where that came from. Manson also dropped in on Melba Cronkite in the Malibu area, driving the big black car and seeking bail money for Maury Brunner. Whoever else Manson may have called is unknown. Arrested on other charges on October 12th, Manson never left jail again. Susan Atkins talked in prison, and the case broke in December. The preceding scenario isn't intended to be the final word on the relevant issues of the Manson case. My interest in it was based on the alleged relationship between Manson II and the original Charlie, and in the charge that Manson, said to be a member of the Son of Sam umbrella cult organization, acted on the request of another. Phil Benson's appearance in the web added more impetus to search through the haze of 16 years. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi was faced with a difficult endeavor as it was. He proved that Manson, although not a direct participant, had ordered the Tate LaBianca killings. The idea of picking through that puzzle to see who may have pulled Manson's strings and why would have been beyond a reasonable expectation at that time. But the biggest connection was one missed by authorities, and that link fused other bombshells which also evaded the police and the district attorney's office. The Summer of Love, 1967, in San Francisco. Throughout the United States, flower power reigned, but San Francisco was Mecca. In a song written by his close friend John Phillips, Scott McKenzie advised people coming to the city by the bay to wear flowers in their hair because summertime will be a lovin' there. Eric Burden of The Animals sang about warm San Franciscan nights. The hometown Jefferson Airplane wanted somebody to love, and told about Alice when she was 10 feet tall in the acid-laced White Rabbit. It was Haight-Ashbury, the Grateful Dead Quicksilver Messenger Service, the Monterey Festival, drugs, sex, Vietnam War resistance, and hippiedom. It was the summer of the Beatles. Sgt. Pepper marched into the United States, dropping hints about sugar cube highs, and the Doors' Light My Fire rocketed to number 1. It was also the era when Charles Manson met up with the Process, and the time when he first met one of the eventual Tate victims. Vincent Bugliosi suspected Manson had contact with the Process in San Francisco, but the prosecution didn't pursue that suspicion. Similarly, the district attorney's office said it sought but was unable to find a link between Manson and Celio Drive victim, which would have significantly altered the perception of the case. But we learned that Charlie and Abigail Folger were friends for a time in San Francisco, and that Manson hooked up with the Process there as well. The Folger information comes from a reliable informant who knew both Folger and Manson. The source said he had dinner one night in September 1967 with Manson, Folger, and 2 other individuals at a small seafood restaurant near Golden Gate Park, not far from Haight. One of the others at the table was an aspiring actor and stuntman named Donald Shorty Shea. He later headed south to Los Angeles and found work at the Svan Movie Ranch. Shortly, Celia was murdered by the family in the fallout from the Tate LaBianca slayings, allegedly because he knew too much. He indeed did. Unknown by the police prosecution, Shia had known Manson and Folger in San Francisco 2 years before the murders and actually went down to LA in Manson's company, according to the source. This revelation also seriously impacts the case. Two people seated in that seafood restaurant that night in 1967 were later murdered on the instructions of a third. The source's statement, which was supported by that of another California informant who said Shia also knew Phil Benson's associates, destroys Helter Skelter as the only motive for the slayings and clearly demonstrates there were other factors involved. The New York informants had hit the target again. Ed Sanders had heard that Manson attended a fundraising event in San Francisco that was chaired by Abigail Folger's mother. He also knew that in 1967 Manson met disciple Maury Brunner at the University of California, Berkeley, where Brunner worked in the library and Folger at the university's art museum. And he had received information that Manson met Folger at Mama Cass's home. But Sanders wasn't able to flesh out the Folger connection. We were. Gibby had more money than she knew what to do with, the source states. She was into finding herself a new direction, and she was always investing in things, including a surfboard shop in Encinitas near San Diego, and not long before the murders, about 6 weeks, she got involved in putting up some cash for a small recording studio. It is possible that Terry Melcher, who knew Manson well, had a link into that studio. This was another twist. Melcher wasn't believed to have been associated with Folger, but the source says he might have been. Excuse me. That night in San Francisco, oh my God. That night in San Francisco, she loaned 10 grand to a small theater. The informant continues. And she had also given money to Charlie from time to time. But then she stopped. Manson turned again when she refused to lay out any more bucks for him. And also because she wouldn't come across for him sexually. Oh, God, sorry. Charlie wanted to make it with her, but she shot him down. So Charles Manson, who would soon orchestrate orgies and command sex at will from his young followers, was spurned by Abigail Folger. Add another item to Charlie's own list of reasons for willingness to oversee butchery on Celio Drive. It made sense that Shia was killed after that, the contact says. He knew both of them, and he could tie things together that nobody wanted tied. From another informant, it was learned that the $10,000 Folger agreed to advance that 1967 night was to help out a San Francisco art house known as the Straight Theater, which was located on the corner of Haight Street and Cole. Not coincidentally, Manson lived at 636 Cole during this period, and the process was ensconced at number 407 on that block. On September 21st, 1967, a rock group called the Magic Powerhouse of Oz, with the word magic deliberately spelled with Aleister Crowley's K on the end, played the Straight Theater to celebrate something occultish known as the Equinox of the Gods, September 21st being the first day of autumn. Lead guitarist and sitar player for the Powerhouse was none other than Bobby Busiloli, who became a Masonite and participated in the 1969 Gary Hinman murder. Manson, Folger, the Straight Theater, and Busiloli, the connections are fascinating. Buscemi was tightly woven to author and bizarre filmmaker Kenneth Anger, who was in the biker mystique and later conducted a magic ritual involving a satanic pentagram during an October 1967 march on the Pentagon. Anger was in the process of filming an occult movie that autumn. It was called Lucifer Rising. Oh, what a weird film. Super weird. Don't watch it. Buscemi, 20, played the part of Lucifer in the picture, and his group was to perform the movie's music. If you could call any of that music, my God. Such as it was so, Sanders reported Anger was present at the Straight Theater that night to film the soiree. Following the path a step further, Anger, LSD guru Timothy Leary, and others were involved in the formation of the Himalayan Academy, which a source described to me as a New Age research foundation of altered states of consciousness. The Academy was stocked with various types of expensive equipment, such as oscilloscopes and electronic measuring devices. It was a mind-bending experiment of the first kind. Sources say the Academy was comprised of at least 50 members, plus another 100 or so hanger-ons. There was considerable wealth in the Academy's rosters of sympathizers, and informants report that Abigail Folger contributed money here as well. Folger had also attended sessions at Esselen, which was neither geographically nor philosophically far from the Himalayan Academy. In fact, Folger may have been at the Esselen on August 2nd or 3rd in 1969, just before Manson arrived there. A phone call probably made by Folger was placed to Esselen from 1005 Celio Drive on July 30th, the Wednesday before the weekend of August 2nd and 3rd. If Folger went to Esselen, her reason may have been simply to attend a sensitivity seminar, or may have been related to other matters connected to the oncoming murders. However, no one has discovered if she even visited the facility at that time. But she was not in Los Angeles. Sanders reported that Frykowski entertained another young lady at Celio Drive that Friday night, demonstrating that Abigail was away. Regardless, the sources say that Folger put some capital into the Himalayan Academy, and that Charlie Manson was also connected to the society. Folger donated to the place, and it was there that Manson was first exposed to the process. An informant says the Academy was into all sorts of things, and the process was invited to speak there. That's how it happened. The source didn't know if Folger was associated with the cult, but according to the informant, Manson joined the cult and later convened with the group in Mill Valley and at a dwelling in San Anselmo, occupied by a well-known personage aligned with the LSD scene. Both cities are in the Bay Area. This scenario raised an inevitable question. Los Angeles sources earlier said that Roy Raiden/Manson 2 suspect Phil Benson frequently traveled to the San Francisco area, the Stanford campus in Palo Alto, and stipulated that he knew Abigail Folger. Benson knew Manson and all the cult people. The other informant said another crucial piece of the puzzle was now in place. And what about the relationship between Manson and the doomed Shorty Shia? They knew each other well enough in San Francisco to travel up to Seattle together to visit a commune started there by Brother Love Israel, said the informant who dined with them. They were tight long before the Safan Ranch and the murders. Authorities had placed Manson in Seattle, but they apparently didn't know why he was there or whom he was with. From Son of Sam in New York to the plains of North Dakota, from a Bible in Caswell Canyon to Benedict Canyon in 1969, and from the grisly faces of prisoners in maximum security jails in New York to mellowed out Summer of Love in in San Francisco 1967, the journey was almost complete. So, what happened at Celio Drive? Like Ed Sanders, I believe a dope burn was the primary motive, and the evidence supports that conclusion. It is also apparent that Manson harbored animosity toward Abigail Folger, and I believe Manson's own race war fantasy, fed by cult mentors and another component. There may be more, but several things seemed very clear. For one, no lower rung dope purveyor could have ordered the killings. Because of the intense heat such publicity and celebrity murders generate, approval would have come from on high. Although the grudge itself may have originated lower on the ladder, Manson didn't commit the Tate LaBianca murders for financial rewards. Was his own helter-skelter motivation enough for him to accept the assignment? If possible, but very doubtful. As unglued as Charlie became, he was still a jail-hardened, street-smart, smooth operator. I and others who assisted in the 1985 through 86 Manson probe believed that Manson stood to gain something beyond fulfillment of helter-skelter or a modicum of revenge against Folger, something that mattered to him personally. A jailed Manson killer whom I interviewed in early 1987 agreed that Charlie never did anything that didn't benefit Charlie himself. I think he used helter-skelter to turn us on. There had to be another motive for the killings, and he was going to get something for himself out of it. What that something was cannot be said with certainty, although suspicions abound. But it might be beneficial to envision that chemical drug pyramid. Perhaps there was someone in it who knew of Manson's volatile mindset, someone who, as part of that pyramid structure, could have agreed to offer Manson something he wanted as a favor to those ranked higher that remains to be proven. Manson certainly was a member of a secret satanic cult. All the evidence and source information points to that, and it is an evaluation I share with others, including Sanders. Bugliosi himself stopped just short of calling Manson a member of the process, and he didn't have access to the information we uncovered. But Bugliosi did point out that 2 process representatives flew from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to visit Manson in jail. After that session, Manson stopped talking about the group. The process went underground in the summer of 1968, and offshoots sprang up in its stead. There, the evidence shows Manson remained and was primed for violence in the company of Phil Benson and others by cult leaders who cross-connected liberally with the drug and celebrity sets. It was startling to see how closely the entire operation reflected the one in New York, but then it should have. As the prison informant said, the same New York... Oh, crap. As the prison informant said, the same organization was behind both movements. Regarding Benson, it is easy to see why Berkowitz said he had the privilege of meeting Manson too. In cultic circles, the man was a superstar. He was connected to Charles Manson, Mama Cass, Abigail Folger, and some top people in the Los Angeles social world. And unknown to Berkowitz, he appeared again in the Roy Radin murder case. In actuality, he was a hired gun. All authorities are now aware of him, and if a case can be made, Benson will be out of business. That's it for today.